What would you think if I told you that a man often realizes her value, not in her presence, but in her absence? That something inside him only starts to ache the moment she withdraws. Not with anger, not with drama, but with the kind of silence that echoes, like a mythological wound, echoing through the caverns of his forgotten psyche. You see, men do not always understand connection through warmth. Many are conditioned to recognize meaning only through loss. When she stops caring, truly stops, the quiet void she leaves behind begins a psychological unraveling he's not prepared for. At first, he might not notice. His ego is loud, built by centuries of archetypes that crown him conqueror. He thinks her detachment is a phase. He imagines she'll return like the tide, soft and predictable, drawn by the gravity of his presence. But she doesn't. That's when it begins. A woman who stops caring is not cruel. She is ancient. She is the part of the feminine psyche that remembers her own divinity, that sheds attachment not out of coldness, but out of necessity. Carl Jung once described the anima, the feminine within man, as elusive, sacred, and transformative. And when she retreats, she activates this archetype in the male unconscious. But instead of transcendence, what arises first is panic, because most men are not prepared to meet themselves. They feel it in the smallest things, in the silence between text messages, in the way her laughter is no longer offered freely, in the absence of her eyes searching his for meaning. It is not her absence that hurts the most, but the realization that he no longer inspires her attention, that she no longer orbits his world, that she has become sovereign. This is where his shadow stirs. Men carry with them the illusion of control. When she stops caring, that illusion begins to shatter. What she triggers is not just heartbreak, it's ego death. And the ego never dies quietly. He will feel confused at first, annoyed, perhaps even angry. He'll wonder why her absence feels louder than her presence ever did. And here, buried beneath his deflection and denial, is the seed of obsession. He may tell himself she was too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding, but his body tells another story. He feels her absence like a phantom limb, because what he truly lost was not just her affection, it was her belief in him. Her light once reflected his worth, and now, without it, he begins to question who he is. The man who relied on her caring to feel significant must now face the truth. He never truly saw her as a separate being. She was an extension of his ego, a soothing balm for his wounds, a mirror that he mistook for his own image. And when she stops reflecting him, he is forced to look inward for perhaps the first time. This is where Jungian shadow work begins, not in therapy, but in loss, in the haunting realization that she no longer sees him as someone to save. And that more than heartbreak is what terrifies him, because deep down, every man carries within him the memory of the mother, the original feminine who once nurtured, soothed, forgave. When the modern woman stops caring, it activates the ancient wound, the withdrawal of unconditional love. But this time, it's not maternal. It's sovereign, it's sacred, it's the woman choosing herself. And this reclaims the balance. He might try to pull her back with guilt, with promises, with "I've changed." But the woman who has done her inner work doesn't respond to words, she feels energy. And she knows the difference between transformation and performance, between regret and responsibility, between wanting her and wanting to be fed by her. The man may spiral. He may grow quiet, distracted, short-tempered with others. Because the truth is, he's grieving, not the relationship, but the loss of power. The end of being her center. And yet, he won't always know how to name it. That's the complexity of male psychology. Emotion must wear the mask of logic to be accepted. So instead of saying "I miss her because I need her warmth," he says she was too much. And in doing so, he delays the very healing that could set him free. But this is not about him. It is about the woman who chooses her own peace over his validation. The woman who finally understands that caring too much for someone who doesn't care enough is a form of self-abandonment. And so she stops, not because she hates him, but because she remembers herself. And when she remembers herself, she does not roar, she does not weep. She simply becomes still. There is something terrifyingly powerful about a woman who no longer explains herself. Her silence is not passive, it is volcanic. It is the quiet rumble beneath the surface of her soul. signaling that a shift has occurred, a psychological severance, not born of bitterness, but of awakening. This is the moment men do not anticipate. They are taught to expect storms, shouting matches, slammed doors, emotional chaos that keeps them central. But she doesn't give them that. Instead, she gives them nothing. And the nothing is definite for a man unacquainted with his inner life. Her detachment feels like annihilation. Her no longer caring pierces straight through his illusions of dominance, desirability, and indispensability. In her absence, he meets the parts of himself he once ignored. The fear, the inadequacy, the longing, the smallness, and none of it is cushioned anymore by her empathy. You see, a woman's caring is a kind of emotional alchemy. It turns rough edges smooth. It gives him the benefit of the doubt. It forgives in places where he never apologized. But when she stops offering that emotional labor, he becomes exposed, naked in the harsh light of accountability. He may try to replace her with distractions and new women, work, prideful solitude. But the wound she leaves is archetypal, because she didn't just stop texting. She stopped feeding the persona he used to believe in. She stopped seeing his potential. She stopped offering sanctuary. This triggers what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow. The part of him he avoids through seduction, performance, and bravado now rises like smoke. And if he is not prepared, he will mistake this reckoning for punishment. But it is not. It is an invitation, one most men decline. Because it's easier to say she changed, that she became cold, that she never really loved him, that she was difficult, moody, complicated. Those lies preserve the ego, but they also prolong the suffering, because deep down, the male psyche knows what it lost. It lost access to something holy, something nourishing, something unconditional. And yet, this is where her power truly begins. Not in the heartbreak she causes, but in the boundaries she builds. In the refusal to continue mothering a man who confuses love with convenience. In the reclamation of emotional sovereignty. Most women are not taught this power. They are raised to equate caring with goodness, to give endlessly, to stay soft even when they're bleeding, to never walk away without guilt. But the woman who understands the psychology behind her own overgiving is dangerous, because she can love and still leave. She sees now that caring too much for the wrong man is a form of emotional self-harm. That trying to fix what he doesn't want to heal is not devotion, it's denial. And so she does the unthinkable. She chooses herself over the fantasy of what he might become. And in doing so, she becomes the mirror. Not the kind that flatters, but the one that reveals. Her withdrawal reflects his hollowness. Her silence magnifies his noise. Her absence exposes his dependency. And whether he admits it or not, it begins to spiral not because she abandoned it, but because she stopped enabling the story. He told himself that she would never leave. The masculine ego is built on conquest, on being chosen, on being the sun around which she revolves. When she steps out of orbit, when she becomes untouchable, not out of spite, but out of sacred necessity, he is left spinning, no longer the center. And it is in this dizzying space of loss that he is faced with a choice. Evolve or repeat. But this story is not about his redemption. This is about the woman who finally knows she doesn't owe closure to someone who never offered clarity. The woman who stops caring. Not because she lacks love, but because she has finally learned what real love feels like. It does not deplete. It does not beg. It does not contort itself to fit someone's unreadiness. And when she stops caring, it's not that her love disappears. It transforms. It turns inward into purpose, into creation, into a devotion to her own spirit, her own life, her own becoming. And as she turns inward, something ancient awakens in her, a remembering, a rising, a reclaiming of all the energy she once poured outward, hoping to be seen. Now she sees herself, not through the eyes of a man needing validation, but through the lens of inner truth, the place where the sacred feminine resides untouched, unbothered, unbroken. This is the moment of individuation, as Jung would call it, not mere detachment, but the sacred passage where she ceases to be merely a projection of a man's anima, his internalized feminine, and becomes whole unto herself, no longer his mirror, no longer his muse, no longer his emotional mother. She becomes sovereign, unclaimed, self-anointed, And he feels it, even if she never speaks again. Even if she walks away without a single glance over her shoulder. He feels it in the hollowness of his mornings, in the way no other voice lands quite the same, in the strange absence of being emotionally pursued. It is not just that she is gone. It is that he knows he cannot follow her into the place she now lives. Because where she has gone is not a location. It is a state of being, a sanctuary of inner peace built from the rubble of old stories. The story that told her she must be needed to be loved. The story that said being chosen by a man made her whole. The story that equated sacrifice with virtue. All of it now burned away by the fire of her own awakening. She is not hard. She is holy. She is not bitter. She is boundaried. And yet, the ache of her absence is not a punishment. It is an unmasking. It reveals to him the difference between being desired and being valued, between being chased and being cherished, between being entertained and being held. And if he's honest, truly honest, he knows now that he offered her none of those things. What he offered was performance, illusion, intermittent presence, and she, believing in his potential, tried to love him into wholeness. But love is not a project, and a woman is not a rehab center for the emotionally unavailable. This is the lesson he never saw coming, that a woman's love is not his to squander, to assume, to test, that it is a gift with a spiritual shelf life. And once she outgrows the version of herself who needed him to feel significant, she becomes untouchable, not in the flesh, but in the soul. It is here where the masculine psyche begins to wrestle with regret. But this is not the simple regret of I lost her. It is the existential ache of I never knew her. He realizes now that he didn't truly see her when she was giving it. He saw the reflection of his own needs in her eyes and called it connection. But it wasn't. It was projection. And projection, Jung warned, is the enemy of intimacy. He didn't love her. He loved the way she made him feel. He loved the power she gave him over her emotion. He loved being central to someone's nervous system. But that wasn't love. That was ego nutrition. And when she stopped feeding it, he starved. But she did not stop because she hated it. She stopped because she woke up, because her nervous system finally screamed loud enough for her to hear. This isn't safe. This isn't love. This isn't home. So she left, not always physically, but energetically. And this departure was seismic, because now she no longer flinches at his silence, no longer dances for his attention, no longer mistakes chemistry for compatibility. She has done the work, the messy, private, painful shadow work. The kind that peels back every childhood wound and romantic delusion until what remains is only truth. And the truth is this: she deserved better, not just from him, but from herself. She deserved her own love, her own compassion, her own gentleness. She deserved to be chosen first by the woman in the mirror. So now, when he comes back, and they always do, it is not her heart that opens, it is her eye, and she sees not a changed man, but a familiar pattern, a loop, a test. And this time, she does not fall into it, because her healing has made her free. Freedom, for the awakened woman, is not loud. It is not announced. It doesn't scream revenge or demand validation. It simply is, a quiet power humming beneath the surface of her life, present in every decision she no longer makes for the sake of being liked, every conversation she no longer stretches to maintain, every man she no longer tries to reach. And the man who once assumed her orbit would remain fixed around him, feels this freedom like a fracture, because what he's truly mourning is not just her absence, but the collapse of the role she used to play in the story he told himself about who he was, the comfort of her presence, the certainty of her forgiveness, the convenience of her emotional labor, all of it gone. It is here that regret turns into reckoning. Jung believed that the psyche is not linear, that it moves in spirals, returning to the same wounds again and again until they are seen fully. And this her leaving is one of those moments, a spiral moment, a confrontation not with her, but with himself. He may spiral into distraction, or worse, denial. He may try to recreate the dynamic with another woman, hoping for the same soft devotion, the same patience, the same emotional generosity. But energy doesn't lie. And something in him knows what he lost was not generic. It was sacred. He may speak of her to friends with casual detachment. She changed. She was too sensitive. She wanted too much. But late at night, in the hollow silence of his own company, The truth seeps in through the cracks. He didn't lose her because she changed. He lost her because she finally saw that he wouldn't. And she did. She changed in the way that all women do when they begin to love themselves more than the idea of being loved. She changed in the way women must when survival demands that they stop romanticizing their own suffering. She changed in the way a caterpillar must disintegrate before becoming a thing with wings. And now that she has wings, she doesn't return to the ground just because he misses her. He may try to call her back with borrowed poetry and half-grown apologies, but the woman who has done her shadow work speaks a different language now. One of boundaries, one of inner peace, one of knowing the cost of returning to a place that broke her, so she remains untouchable. And it isn't arrogance, it's alignment. Because to care again would require her to shrink again, to ignore the intuitive whispers she has spent months, maybe years, learning to hear, to mute the sacred rage that once told her, "You're not here to be convenient." And she won't do that, not anymore. She sees now that love is not proven through endurance, that loyalty is not measured by how long you can bleed for someone who won't stop cutting you, that caring is not weakness, but offering it to the undeserving is for the man still watching her from a distance, still haunted by the memory of the woman who once lit up. When he entered a room, he begins to understand something, terrifying and true. She doesn't need him anymore, not even a little. Not because she hates him, not because she wants revenge, but because she has become whole. And wholeness does not beg, it does not chase, it does not compromise itself for temporary company. It walks in silence, it speaks with presence. It moves through the world with a kind of radiance that is both inviting and untouchable. It is the woman who has nothing to prove anymore, because she is no longer performing. She is living, and that is what he misses most. Not just her love, but her aliveness in his presence. The sparkle in her eyes that told him he was special. The way she made him feel like more than he was. The emotional shelter she built with her very breath. Gone, all of it. Because she stopped caring, yes, but more than that. Because she started remembering who she was before the pain, before the pleasing, before the pattern, before she convinced herself that love meant endurance. Now she knows love begins with her, and when love begins with her, it no longer requires external confirmation to feel real. She does not measure her worth by his return, nor does she await the redemption arc that never arrives. She has outgrown the need to be chosen, because she has chosen herself in a way no man ever could. This is the culmination of deep psychological transformation. The same spiral Jung spoke of. She has circled the wound enough times to no longer fear it. She has walked through the fire of heartbreak, not to prove her strength to anyone else, but to purify the illusion that caring too much was ever her power. It wasn't. Her power was always in her awareness, in her stillness. In the moment she looked at her reflection, no longer saw someone waiting for his reply, waiting for his attention, waiting for his change, waiting for closure, waiting to matter. She doesn't wait anymore. She creates, she claimed. She exists in fullness. The way the moon does not beg the tides. The way fire does not apologize for burning. The way a tree does not rush its bloom for anyone's desire. She becomes nature again, wild, cyclical, sovereign. And yet, the paradox remains. It is now, when she no longer seeks it, that he begins to seek her. Not because he suddenly understands her depth, but because she no longer needs him to. This shift in energetic polarity is profound. What once felt like pursuit becomes magnetism. What once was effort becomes essence. Her detachment, once feared as abandonment, now reveals itself as freedom. And this, he cannot replicate. He can't find it in the arms of another, because she did not just offer love. She offered presence, a full-bodied, soul-rooted intimacy born from caring deeply. But she no longer gives that away. Not freely, not blindly, not without discernment. She has learned what it costs to give her energy to someone who confuses access with entitlement. And now, she guards herself not with walls, but with wisdom, with the quiet knowing that what she carries is rare, and that rare things are not chased. They are chosen with reverence. He may see her thriving now, smiling in photos, creating new worlds with her words, her art, her community. And something within him aches, not just because she's moved on, but because she did it without needing to be seen doing it. She didn't perform her healing, she lived it. And that difference is everything. Because true healing is quiet. It happens in the absence of applause. It happens in the hard choices, the lonely nights, the boundaries enforced with trembling hands, the tears that no one else will ever witness. It happens in the mirror, in the journal, in the unspoken moments where she chooses to believe in her future more than she mourns her past. And now, her silence is not empty. It is sacred. Her distance is not punishment. It is protection. Her detachment is not cruel. It is clarity, because she has finally come home to herself. And this, more than anything, is what men secretly feel when she stops caring. They feel her return to a place that cannot follow her own center. They feel the intimacy she now shares with herself, the peace that no longer depends on their approval, the joy that no longer needs to be validated, the strength that no longer requires a witness. They may never admit it, they may never say the words, but deep in the hidden corridors of their psyche, where archetypes and memory live, they know she was the real thing. She was the kind of love that doesn't just touch your body, it awakens your soul, the kind that holds you accountable, that mirrors your shadow, that calls you forward, the kind that most men fear until it's gone, because it requires something few are ready to give, their full presence. But she no longer waits for that, because she has become fully present to herself. And this is what it means to rise, not as a reaction, but as a return to wholeness, to feminine divinity, to inner truth, the kind that no man can grant and no man can take away. And in that return, she becomes unforgettable, not because he misses her, but because she will never again miss herself. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.